All right, I am so excited to be back with another episode of Embrace Your Brand, and I have a very special guest on today. Her name is Kristina Rowland, and I am so excited because she, to me, is like someone who has achieved those levels of success that I think most of us are kind of striving for. She is like the automation queen and doing such amazing things with just helping people with like branding and digital marketing and all sorts of things. But I'm going to let her just introduce herself and kind of dive into what all it is that she does. So thank you so much, Kristina, for being here today.
Well, I will take that introduction anytime. I think, sometimes we are our own worst critics. And so, me sitting here thinking, going into 2024, thinking about goals and dreams and all of these things, I'm like, I haven't accomplished hardly anything. And then I look, I look back and I'm like, oh, actually, you have done some things. And so that's great. But you are free to introduce me anytime. I would just keep you in my pocket and carry you around with
Here
me.
you go. I'll be your little
Um,
MC to introduce you to places.
yeah, for that kind of stuff. And so, for those people who I might have met before, hello. For those that I haven't met, hello to you also. It's nice to meet you. My name is Kristina Rowland, and I am a serial entrepreneur completely by accident. So I never actually dreamed of being an entrepreneur. I was very much in the go to school, get good grades, get, your degree, get a good job, start at the bottom, work your way to the top, live happily ever after kind. And I got thrown out of that pretty much kicking and screaming out, and I became what I like to call an unlikely entrepreneur, which is a completely different story, probably for another time. But my last job that I ever had inside of corporate America, I was forced to go back to work 3 days after having a baby or lose my job. And they fired me 3 months later anyway. So I decided in that moment that no one was ever going to have that much control over my life again. And it wasn't in that, I shouldn't say in that moment, but that moment caused me later, after a lot of reflection, prayer, um, accountability, like personal accountability, to
Mhm.
come to the conclusion that I really never wanted to let anybody have that much control over my life. And that's how I became an entrepreneur. And I have been building, scaling, selling, and automating businesses for about 15 years now after that.
That's exciting. So, what are some of the businesses that you have been building in this time?
Yeah, so I started with a cake decorating business.
Ooh.
That was my very first adventure. I watched probably too much Cake Boss and decided to open up a little business. I had two very small boys at the time. Now I have three kids, but I wanted a way to stay home with them and still make some money. So there was that. And then my mom and I opened up a transportation company, which was kind of like Uber before Uber was a thing, specifically for people who had workers' compensation injuries. So we would pick them up and take them to whatever appointments they needed for either their rehabilitation or their treatment. We did that, and that was a nightmare, logistical, absolute nightmare.
Mhm.
After that, I got into financial services. So I figured out that there was money in money, and I let that kind of be my primary driver. And that was my first six-figure business. So that was the first business that we were able to scale to over six figures, scaled actually pretty massively, ended up with 47 agents across the country. And that was my first like very successful business. But that's also where I experienced burnout for the very first time in a work setting. And so that wasn't ultimately the healthiest business that we ever built. And since then, I have built a also multiple six-figure social media branding and coaching business, along with a full service digital media agency, as well. So, and that's what I'm currently doing.
Very nice. That's exciting. I kind of picked up on a couple similarities there when you said cake decorating. I did go to culinary school, and that was my primary concentration. And that was something that a lot of people afterwards were like, "Are you going to go into the cake decorating business?" And I immediately was like, "No," because that is a high stress field. Because I
Mhm.
freak out just thinking about it's got to look just right. It's got to look a certain way. Then I got to transport it to wherever it needs to go, and I'm like
Yeah.
afraid that something's going to happen in the transportation of it. It's going to get messed up. So I was like, no, I won't do that. I did fruit trays and other types of catering instead. So it I kind of see a little bit of me in your story.
Yeah.
Um, but that's, if you think about it, it feels like you really switched gears from catering to transportation to, accounting and things like that. What were some of the, I don't know, factors that really played into your choices with choosing these different business opportunities?
Yeah, so the first one I chose because I liked to do that, and that was actually probably my first mistake. Um, and it doesn't happen all of the time, but
Mm.
especially in creative, it's sometimes difficult to turn your creative outlet, your hobby, your passion into something that means your compensation and your livelihood because it can kind of take the joy out of it. And I'm not saying that
Mhm.
that happens for everybody. Like, obviously, there are great examples like Taylor Swift has done it, like musicians and people like this, but sometimes it is really a challenge, or at least it was for me in that instance, to take my creative, which was an outlet, and turn
Mhm.
it into my responsibility. And so I think sometimes hobbies should just be hobbies and not be monetized. And just knowing yourself and figuring that out for yourself, I think is kind of like an inside job.
Yeah.
So, the second two businesses were purely strategic. So it was that my mom and I knew somebody who had too much work in this space. We're like, oh, if he has too much work and he's turning down new clients, then there must be opportunity to make money. And while there was, we also didn't understand a lot of the logistics behind it. Different kinds of auto insurance, like without getting into too much of the details, there were just like a lot of overhead that we were not aware of. And then the logistics for me, where I still have like PTSD to this day about my phone ringing. And it's because we had one vendor that was on the East Coast and we were Mountain Time, and one vendor that was on the West Coast. And our East Coast, they opened up at 5 o'clock their time, which is 3 o'clock Mountain Time.
Mhm.
And then our West Coast vendor didn't close until I think 8 or 9 p.m. And so I was getting phone calls 10 or 11 p.m. So I would be fielding phone calls potentially from 3 a.m. to 11.
Oh, wow.
And it was just became overwhelming, the logistics side of it. Now on the finance, it was again where I looked up on Google industries that are top paying without having to go back to school because I didn't want to do that. I had two kids under the age of 3, and like I'm not going back to school. And financial services, which is super high on that list for potential income without having to go back to to get another degree, spend more time, more
Yeah.
money in higher education. And so they were very like strategic, emotionless. This looked really, really good on paper choices.
Okay.
So I kind of went from one extreme to the other. And my social media business, my branding business was birthed out of me solving my own problems inside of my financial business. And people would just ask me. So I built a multiple six-figure a year revenue completely based on social media. No, all organic, not a single ad dollar spent. And it was a franchise that we were a part of. So there were other franchise owners that were just kind of like watching from the sidelines. How are you doing this? And so all of my current services have been birthed out of some kind of necessity where somebody saw me doing something for myself and said, "Oh my gosh, do you ever think that you would help doing something like that?" And I love that. Like, strategically looking back, that has been the most enjoyable. It has led to the most time freedom, energy freedom. Like, I'm just kind of doing what I would have already been doing. And it's where like the passion and the function meet in the middle. So like this business is kind of the middle ground, I
Mm.
would say, between all of the businesses that I've started, scaled, and then eventually either sold or stopped doing completely.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you feel like for you maybe specifically has been one of the factors that contributes to your ability to scale your business? Like what were some things that you really focused on to scale, to expand, and to create what you have now?
That is a great question. So, first of all, automation.
Mhm.
I've been automating a lot of things for years. So this is now it's automation plus AI, but there are so many things that can be automated with good software. Specifically, you can get a pretty inexpensive scheduler for content,
Mhm.
and you can schedule posts to multiple different places at the same time. There are tons of like, I'm not going to get into the weeds on what these specific tools are because there are just so many on the market, and I'm not sure when someone's going to watch this and whether or not it's going to be as good
Yeah.
when they watch this episode. But there are lots of tools available to just kind of do the mundane, repetitive work. So that's how I've been able to free up a lot of energetic bandwidth to be more creative, to scale, to do the things that only I can do, is by delegating first to technology what I don't have to do and don't really like to do. Then beyond that, if I can't delegate it to technology, that's when I'll see about delegating it to a staff member, or scaling, because I'm running a multi six-figure business with one support staff currently, one virtual assistant, and so that keeps overhead really, really low. And it's because I've delegated to technology. Now,
Mhm.
technology makes a very poor you. Like automation and AI make a very bad you, but they make excellent assistants or excellent coaches. So, like, I will go to AI and automation to ask questions about, okay, if I were a Forbes 500 CMO, what would I do next? You can ask AI these questions, and depending on how you phrase those prompts, you can get really good responses.
Yeah.
And then just using the technology that's out there, both free and paid, to delegate mundane, menial, I don't want to do it tasks. So that's where we lose a lot of energy in our business as either um, emerging entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, is by spending, 4 or 5 hours a day doing what AI or automation could do in minutes.
Yeah. I know that, especially is true for myself of like when I sit down and think about all the little things that I do, and
Mhm.
especially if you want to increase visibility when you're like, "Ah, I need to put something on this platform and this platform. And by the time you're done, you have 5 or 6 different places you're putting the exact same things in
Yes.
slightly different formats. That does take a lot of time. And like you said, emerging entrepreneurs, it's all them to get started. And, I feel like you've kind of done your homework on what automations are really great for you. And like you said, there with the changing of technology, there's going to be things that are really great right now that may change later. Some other automation system may come up that's even better. Um, But what are maybe some of the things that you really would pinpoint as these, whenever you can automate these or find a way to do that, definitely go that direction?
I really think it comes down to anything that I have to do more than once in my day, I'm
Mhm.
gonna try and automate that. Um, and in a business, uh you have a lot of margin on the top, but not so much margin like on the bottom. And what I mean by that is there are some pretty big drags on a business, and then there are some like what I call anchors, and then there are sales on your business, and there are about three in each category. So the sales on your business are the three needle moving activities. These are the activities that are going to generate 80% of your revenue. This is Pareto's principle, where you get 80% of any result that you're looking for from about 20% of your activity.
Yeah.
And so those three, what I call needle moving activities, these are going to be the ones that I know are going to generate revenue for me. And most of my revenue is coming from these three activities. Those are the ones that I'm never going to delegate. Well, I am gonna automate, but probably not delegate. I'll automate if I can, but they're the ones that I'm gonna get done first. They're the ones that are like the ball is not generally leaving my court. This is something that I need to be super involved with. But on the flip side of that, there are three activities in everybody's business that is causing 80% of their problems. Okay,
Mhm.
so if there are three activities causing 80% of the revenue, like the Pareto principle applies in reverse. You've got three activities that are causing most of your drag. So if you can pinpoint what those are, because they're going to be different in every business, like there's probably 20 total, but they're going to be different for every person because every person, especially in solopreneurship, has different strengths and different weaknesses, right?
Mhm.
But when you can pinpoint what those are, and here's a good kind of way to figure that out. It's the tasks that take you a very long time. And so you tend to procrastinate them.
Mhm.
And when you procrastinate and delay on them, they cause much bigger problems than if you had just taken care of it when you should have taken care of it. But you just can't bring yourself. You're going through this cycle, and the reason you can't bring yourself to stop procrastinating on these things is because you're bad at them and you hate them. And so if you know that is your nature, you could try and change that about yourself. You could try and love the follow up. So, like for me, it's follow up. I am horrible. I could not bring myself to follow up to save my life. And then the other one is like the post sale
Mhm.
experience, like the post sale customer experience. That was one, like I was always afraid that someone was going to cancel. Like if I was able to get them like closed on my service, like I almost don't want to talk to them again because I'm afraid they're gonna like it's gonna undo it somehow.
Yeah.
And so I have built systems and automations to make sure that this gets taken care of regardless of whether I'm really involved. And so anytime I do get really involved, it just is like cherry on top, right? But every business has three of these where it's causing 80% of your drag, where this is where you're losing clients, you're losing time, it's very inefficient, it takes you longer than it should be. So if you can automate those three activities, they need to get done in your business, they're non-negotiable. You can't, if you use the Eisenhower metrics or matrix, these are not things that you can just get rid of in your business. Like you can't eliminate them. They need to get done. You automate those first, and when you get rid of that drag, it makes your business just move faster and you can scale even higher if you just solve for those. Like you don't have to increase your sales skills, you don't have to increase your visibility, even if you didn't do anything else positive, but you just eliminated that energetic waste or
Mhm.
time waste. your business would be, I don't know, 2 to 5 times better than if you just let them
Mm.
exist
Yeah.
and keep trying to get yourself to love the things that you don't love about your business.
Yeah. That's really great advice. I love that. And I've heard the 80/20 rule like multiple times, and I keep kind of going back even for myself of how do I really pinpoint those things and how do I really work within, those spheres? And I like that you broke it up into like the two different things. Like there's three things that make up the 20%. There's the three things that make up the 80% that's just kind of causing us to slow down and not actually scale or speed up or increase that income in the way that we're really wanting to.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, like you said, doesn't require any extra on our part if we can pinpoint those and do what's needed to, either automate or find a way or someone else delegating that to increase those things. Um, and I'm just curious, like, when it comes to those 20% of things that is the real needle movers in your business, what's been a really good way for you to kind of pinpoint that for yourself as to what those are? Like, did you go through sort of self-discovery phases or really just, journal out a lot of things with your business? What was your method?
Yeah, so a couple of things. It does come from a level of self-awareness, which I think everybody for their own benefit should prioritize self-awareness.
Mhm.
Not not through a critical lens though. This is where I think
Yeah.
people really mess themselves up is um I never look at myself super critically, much to the chagrin of a lot of people who would wish otherwise. So like Christina, how can you be like that? Um, but it was just, these are I'm not examining myself to pass judgment. I'm really just looking for patterns.
Yeah.
Like I have these patterns of behavior and none of my patterns of behavior are like particularly self-destructive. Luckily I don't suffer from a lot of those things. So knowing that I'm not looking at myself critically, I just am trying to find the patterns so that I can build a system around those patterns of behavior. I think it's trick number one. Um, it wasn't a lot of journaling, but I was, like I said, looking for particular patterns in my life. And one exercise that I encourage my clients to do a lot is to figure out what you do when you avoid the work. Like, what are you doing when you avoid the work? Because you're naturally going to do what you're best at.
Hmm.
You're naturally going to do the things that are most enjoyable to you. And so for me, my needle moving activities are number one, creating content. Okay. And this is something that I would do very naturally. I would go out into social media and I would play around on social media instead of prospecting for my business. Um, and then it just became prospecting for my business, but content was number one. This is, I think, a non-negotiable inside of the top three for everybody because it's a very high leverage activity. Like I can make one piece of content and I have a video library of about 10 videos right now that I know anytime I post them, they're gonna get 1 million views every time I post it. I've got 10 videos. It's like when I need 1 million views because I need like I'm doing a launch or something like this, I need the attention. I know exactly what I need to post in order to get that influx of attention, and then I know exactly what I need to post to nurture that attention, and it just creates this evergreen sales cycle, which is really dependable, which is really nice in a business. So for me, content was number one. Now, two and three are probably going to be a little bit different for everybody, but for me, one is rest. Like I need an obscene amount of rest. In the last 2 days, well, this last week, I would say in the last 10 days. Okay, in the last 10 days, I flew to California for an event for a client. I was recording behind the scenes content as part of his enterprise marketing contract that we have together. I fly out when they have big events. I capture a bunch of behind the scenes content, and then we use that content in reels and stories and things like that for the next 90 days until the next event. So I was out in Ontario, California. I left on a Friday. I was there Saturday. I flew back Sunday. I was home on Sunday for about 6 hours before I flew to Costa Rica to do the same thing for another client who was having a mastermind in Costa Rica. Now, mind you, they paid for my flight, they paid for my hotel, they paid my event rate while I was there. And so it was lovely. I am getting flown across the world to play around on my phone, essentially.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and
awesome.
so it's such a blessing. Okay. It's such a
Yeah.
blessing. But that was a lot of effort. Like that was a lot of
Yeah.
travel. That was a lot of effort. That was a lot of everything. And so I have probably slept 18 hours out of the day for 3 of the days since I've been back.
Mhm.
And I don't apologize about it.
Yeah. And
And I don't,
that's something that I think a lot of us don't tend to do. We work, 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 and then are like,
yes.
okay, I still got to do everything else. I like that you said that because it is, you know, we don't think rest is something that's productive for us all the time. And it
Yes.
is.
Well, and it's because of how we frame productivity,
Yeah.
right? And I learned this frame for productivity that I promise you it saved my life. Like it, or at least added 10 years back to it.
Hmm.
Right? Productivity is just making progress toward a specific goal. Like it's the measure of progress toward a specific goal. And so you can make the goal whatever you want.
Yeah.
My goal is to be the healthiest, happiest, most capable version of me. And that requires about 10 hours of sleep a day, 8 hours at night, and a 2 hour nap. Like I don't pull all dayers. That's not my style. But I can get so much more done when I have that much rest. And so I view my rest as progress toward the goal of being the happiest, healthiest, most capable version of myself.
Yeah.
And then the third needle moving activity for me is learning something new. These 3 things, if I don't do anything else in a day, but make content, make sure that I'm well rested, and learn something new, that's where 80% of my revenue comes from. Because I'm in a service-based business, right?
Hmm.
And so my business doesn't actually, I think there's this misconception that I would like to dispel and like shout it from the rooftops. Businesses don't exist to make the business owner money. Like we are not entitled to make a profit. We are not entitled to revenue. Businesses exist to provide a service to somebody, to provide value to somebody. That is why businesses exist. And so my ability to learn new information, to curate and go through, like, if you wanted to know the best way to automate a funnel on Instagram, there are millions of options out there. I promise you, I have looked at every single one and I can tell you point blank for your business which are going to be the 3 best options, but probably even I'll give you 3 options, but I will tell you like this one option is the one that you should go with.
Yeah.
And that is what people are paying for so that they don't have to go through all of the million different options and figure it all out.
Yeah.
And so those are my 3 needle moving activities. And how you kind of figure that out is, like I said, self-discovery. You could do a lot of journaling. Where do you go when you're avoiding the work?
Mhm.
There's probably something about that that you're already talented in, that you already find joy in. There's definitely something about that that you can monetize. And knowing what function your business serves in the bigger scheme of things,
Yeah.
not just in its ability to produce revenue into your bank account. What else
Yeah.
does it do? What is
That's
it
awesome.
bigger than that?
Yeah. And that's such a good point to kind of end on is just knowing that your business, yes, you play a huge part in it, but the part where your business gives back is not giving back to you. It's giving back to those that it is in service to, those that it's providing that value or that solution to. And I think that when you focus more on what is that value that I'm giving, then you can be in that kind of a abundance zone where you're like, I want to keep giving and giving, because what you reap, you sow. What you give out is
Yeah.
going to come back to you, and come back to you maybe even tenfold. So, those three things that you talked about were fantastic. And I hope that everybody listening is excited to go and think of, what are my 3 needle movers that I really need to prioritize, and how can I start doing that? While also figuring out, what are the 3 things that I need to start, automating or kind of delegating, so that it's not dragging me down and weighing me down and keeping me from moving and progressing forward. So, Kristina, thank you so much for all of the wonderful value that you provide.
Thanks
And
for having me.
I so appreciate it. Your links will be in the show notes. And if you have loved listening to Kristina, you're welcome to go and find her and connect with her as well. So thank you so much, Kristina.
Thanks so much, Laura.